Grab your pre-workout and turn up that volume. It is time for a new episode of the Powerlifter's Den with your host, Cam Smith. What's up, Powerlifter's Den family? Want to rep the podcast and look good while doing it? Check out my official merch store at plden.company.site. We've got tees, hoodies, beanies, hats, and more, and gear that'll keep you motivated in and out of the gym. Every purchase helps support me and the podcast and keeps the den growing strong. So whether you're hitting a heavy squat session or just lounging in style, we've got you covered. Head to plden.company.site and grab your merch today. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Powerlifter's Den. I'm your host, Cam Smith, and today I wanted to bring on Meghan Scanlon, a two-time IPF champ and 4 times world champ. Meg, why don't you introduce yourself?
I got nothing. No, my name is Meghan Scanlon. I've been powerlifting for a while, and that's about all I got.
Yeah, so to get started, obviously I like to get a background on everyone and kind of see where they came from. And for you, I know you started rather later than most people would say is a time to start powerlifting. So kind of tell us about what got you into that.
Yeah, I definitely wasn't a junior. I was never a junior, didn't do the junior route. And I feel like that's something that has changed so much as I've been powerlifting for the past 8-9 years or so. So I didn't really start powerlifting until I was about 28, which would be considered very old to start powerlifting and compete at like the elite level now. But you know, I just didn't even know it was a thing really until then. So like played sports growing up, and after I played soccer in college, I started running, like ran marathons just because I wanted to do something. Obviously wasn't super competitive at endurance races. So when I found powerlifting and I realized that I could be a little bit competitive in it, it was something that was exciting for me.
Yeah, so I believe you said that you kind of were in the world of fitness before, the strength and fitness world, but you never really kind of got a grasp on what powerlifting was or have stepped onto a platform until later. So maybe tell us about just kind of like your life before that and then kind of going into the first time you stepped on a platform.
Yeah, for sure. First time I touched a barbell was probably in college, like in the weight room, strength and conditioning for soccer. I was pretty lucky. I had very good strength coaches in college. I know it's more common now, but again, like I graduated college in 2010, so it was a while ago. So I was familiar with the barbell. And so when I graduated college and wasn't an athlete anymore, I was still going to the gym and still using the barbell because I was comfortable with that. And so I was always strong. I just never really knew that strength itself, what could be a sport, right? Like CrossFit was just starting to get huge. I never really dipped my toes in CrossFit. I was running, but again, like still lifting. I majored in exercise science. So like within that, I was also coaching like strength and conditioning, and I taught high school science. So I was like very much involved in like the strength world. I just, again, like didn't know it was an option until much later. I had started running strength and conditioning classes for adults and for athletes out of a gym. So I was like subletting space out of a warehouse gym. And within that, there was powerlifters that were training. And that was my first exposure. So I was kind of like, what? I don't understand what you guys are training for. Even once I knew, I was like, that sounds really cool. It sounds like something I might be good at given my strengths, my literal strengths as an athlete. And like I tried basically a meet that was just, it was like the most casual thing I've ever done. It was like, I called someone to sign up for the meet. Let's put it that way. Like it was at a gym. I don't remember the federation. It was just, I don't even think there was a combo rack. Like it was very casual, but I had a blast. And I was like, I think I want to do this, but I still waited 2 more years before I really got involved and started competing and training for powerlifting.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the cool things, or not necessarily cool things, but one of the interesting things about powerlifting is like, it's kind of unknown until you get into it, because most people think, oh, strength sports are like strongman, or, oh, you do CrossFit, or, oh, you're a bodybuilder. It's like, no, I do 3 lifts and I just repeat the same lifts until they get stronger.
Over and over. Yeah. I get a lot when I say I do powerlifting, like, oh, so you're going to the Olympics. I'm like, that's weightlifting. Yep. But yeah, sure. Like, sometimes I'm just like, yeah, I'm going to go to the Olympics. That's it. I'm like, not at all, but it's fine.
Yeah. And then trying to explain gear lifting after that too is a whole different level of conversation. Like trying to explain what multiply is to my grandmother is a wild conversation, but yes, it's definitely interesting.
Yes. Yeah.
So as far as kind of where you started to where you are now, obviously you've won a few high level meets. So kind of along the way, not only what did it take to get to that point, but maybe some of the influences or kind of figuring it out.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of funny. I feel like I've almost had two like powerlifting journeys, careers. I don't know what you want to call it, right? Like it's not a career, but you know what I'm trying to
Yeah, yeah,
say
yeah.
here. Uh, like when I started, I was 28 and I competed for, I don't know, probably like 3 years, 3.5 years. And I was lucky enough that when I started, I was very strong, like I said, and like had success pretty immediately. Like I went to IPF Worlds in like 2.5 years maybe after I started competing. So pretty quickly, totally naive, obviously, like, but just threw myself in it. Which I think was a great thing in some regards because I didn't have a ton of, I had a lot of expectations, but didn't have a lot of expectations. And probably some were a little ridiculous too, just because I was so naive. Um, and I came in second the first time I competed at IPF Worlds. Thought maybe I'd try one more time to go back to Worlds. I ended up getting hurt, didn't have a great nationals, and then was like, I'm gonna have kids, right? So now I'm like 31, 32. So ended up getting pregnant right after the 2020 Arnold, which is kind of nuts because obviously that's when COVID happened too.
Yeah.
That whole year. So during the whole COVID year, when not many people were competing, I was pregnant. Didn't plan on really returning, at least to elite level powerlifting. But I just think because it was something I knew, something I was comfortable with as a new mom, and obviously COVID was still lingering, like as they were newborns and stuff. It gave me something to do that I was familiar with and something that made me happy. So I started lifting again, and it kind of just snowballed into what I would say is like my powerlifting journey now, right?
Yeah.
What I think of when I think of myself powerlifting. And I'm like super grateful I actually had that break in between just because it's made me enjoy the experience so much more and like really appreciate it. Whereas before, not that I was taking it for granted or like, you know, just assuming things were going to happen, but like I kind of was, like I was kind of like, not that I was cocky about it, but I kind of was, and not necessarily trying to like live in the moment and appreciate the moment, and like have more fun with it.
Yeah, and that's something that I've seen with a lot of high level athletes or high level powerlifters that kind of have that like initial like right out the gate like full throttle, and then they have some sort of setback, but they
Mm-hmm.
come back from it and they continue their career, but they also have so much a way better outlook on it to that it
Yeah,
extends the longevity of their career.
100%. I agree with you. Like any elite level powerlifter that I've spoken to that for some reason, right, like has to take a break, whether it's an injury, whether it's a life thing, they have to take a forced break or a chosen break, and then they come back, especially if in that first half they were a little like burnt out and a little sick of it. They end up, right, physically I was capable, but it was a mindset shift for me. I
Yeah.
was really game changing.
So as far as the way I look at it is like kind of there's almost like two ways. Like I mentioned it before we start recording. There's like kind of two sides of powerlifting. It's not necessarily
Yeah.
just like raw and equipped, but there's more people that go the USAPL or like the Powerlifting America route to IPF, and they kind of do that. Whether it's a team aspect, whether they're joining from collegiates because USAPL is larger in college, or they kind of go the more local feds or do things like that. So, kind of what led you down that path to go towards the IPF?
Ah, you know, other than I outside of that first meet, um, where again, like I don't remember the fed that it was, but outside of that first meet, when I decided I wanted to compete again, I kind of just researched and saw like, okay, US at the time was USAPL, and they look like the biggest federation. I knew I wanted to compete raw. The gym that I found powerlifting in, there was a lot of equip lifting. Um, but I knew I wanted to compete raw, and I saw that it was kind of the biggest and could lead to opportunities to compete on different stages. I don't know if I thought I could do that at that point in time, but I thought maybe like I could go to nationals and compete against thousands of other people, and that would be really cool. And then once I started, I kind of just stayed with it. So
Yeah, so
Yeah.
kind of going into the IPF in the world, before you kind of maybe tell us about your experience, maybe just for someone listening that doesn't really know how it works, maybe kind of tell us the maybe the stepping stones of the process it takes to get to that stage.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, like everyone that competes first, right, will compete at a local meet. So I competed at a local meet, and then eventually I did do regionals, which I know like not a ton of people go that route, but I did do a regional meet, and I was convinced to do a national level meet. Basically, someone said you should really try it, so I did my first one. My first national meet after that. But pretty typically, someone's going to go to a local meet, get a qualifying total for nationals. Then you can obviously opt to go to nationals or not. And then if you go to nationals and you win and you hit a qualifying total, you can compete at worlds. And then there's also different international meets you can qualify for as well.
Yeah, so with your two championships at IPF Worlds, yeah, IPF Worlds,
Mm.
what years were that, and kind of how was the experience, and where was it?
Sure. So the first one was 2022, and that was in South Africa. So very far away.
Yeah.
And then the last one was last year, so 2024, and that was in Lithuania, um, which, relatively speaking, much closer. Uh, what's cool though, so my first one was 2019, and from 2019 to 2024, seeing the world stage grow, not just in competitors that has grown, but in the viewership and also spectators like physically there, both in like more athletes supporting other athletes and also having like fan bases almost come to where worlds is really cool, because the first one I went to was like silent.
Yeah, I was actually recording an episode that comes out tomorrow, and I was saying how like the difference between like some of the um maybe some of the like not necessarily WPO, but like either the big dogs meet or like those old meets
Mhm.
versus like some of the IPF Worlds meets where it's more like almost like a golf match where it's like it's so
Yes.
serious that it's quiet.
Yes. The first one I did was it was because USAPL, some of those meets can be big and loud and rowdy and awesome. And then I went to IPF Worlds my first time and it was silent.
Yep.
You could hear a pin drop. It was almost disconcerting. Like as a lifter, I was like, oh, this is weird. Like I don't know how I feel about this. But over the years, that's changed significantly, which is really cool because I personally like more of a vibe in the
Yeah.
audience when I'm lifting. Um, I know that varies in opinion, but I like that. So I just like last month competed at Sheffield, which is like SBD throws this huge meet right in the UK, and I think it's like 3,000 people or so in the audience, and for some people, that's obviously wouldn't be their jam, right? Like that's overwhelming. It's a lot of people. For me, I'm like, hell yes. Like this is amazing. And I thought I would think that. And it was confirmed. Like the first time I stepped on the stage, I was like, no, this is awesome. This
Yeah.
is what every meet should be like. So for me, like seeing the spectatorship like in person and the fan base grow over time at world meets has been awesome.
Yeah, so this is funny because this will age well when it comes out next week. About how like I think that's one of my issues with that kind of competition was like the serious tone of it. But hearing you say that it's kind of changing for that hype, I think it's not only better for viewership and kind of just the experience in general, but it also allows that lifter to kind of have their moment rather than up here goes another one on to the next one.
Mhm. Absolutely. Yeah. And it makes it feel more like a sport, you know?
Exactly. Yeah, because if you
Yeah.
go to a football game, the crowd's silent. Like you're not going to be having as much fun as you would if there's people throwing beers and shit in the crowd. And
Yeah, like it needs to be a little rowdy, you know what I mean? Otherwise, I might as just well live in my basement.
exactly. So how does IPF work in terms of like as far as I know, it's like more of like a team competition rather than an individual, right?
Like when you go to Worlds.
Yes.
Yeah, it's definitely both. Definitely both. You know what I mean? In terms of team and individual competition, and obviously different people's goals differ. Obviously, the higher you place as an individual, the better the team does. Typically speaking, like the U.S. has pretty good success at Worlds, both on the men's and the women's side. The men's side is very dominant at Worlds, typically speaking, but the women's side we've been hanging on to winning year after year, which is pretty cool. And it definitely makes it you more engaged in other weight classes as well, in other weight class battles as well.
Yeah, and so as far as kind of that sort of strategy as like being a coach for the IPF, um,
Mm.
when I talked to think he was an Ireland coach for the IPF at one point, Jay Farrant, and he was saying how the like different strategies of like giving different people different attempts. So I don't know how maybe the coach side on the US works for that, but how does that kind of strategy go into meet day? Like, do you necessarily have an idea of what you're pulling for, or not necessarily pulling, but what your attempts are going to be going in, or can it wildly change?
Yeah, so I mean, I think this varies. This probably varies a lot country to country too. But for the US, we do have pretty much a lot this final say in our temp selection, mainly because like we are self-funded, right? Like we're paying,
Yeah.
right? Like for ourselves to go and to compete at Worlds. Where some countries that differs. That's not always true. Sometimes the country itself will pay for the lifters. So yes, the coaches obviously are giving insight, and it depends who the coach is and how involved they are, like the Team USA coach. But we still have like if you opt to have your individual coach there as well.
Yeah. And then I guess kind of shifting gears from IPF into Sheffield, like you said, I know some people like to call that like the Super Bowl of powerlifting. Obviously, it has a big crowd behind it and a lot of media production, a lot of people,
Mm.
like some of the best lifters in the USAPL and just that side of the sport. So, kind of tell us about the experience of going to there and competing.
It was so cool. I like I've tried to explain it and reflect on it. And I honestly, every time I'm like, I don't even have words because it was the first time where I was like, I felt like I was a professional athlete. You know what I mean? Like I showed up from the time I showed up to the time I left. Like it was so well put together for the whole weekend. And then the event itself, I almost feel like I didn't even compete. Like I feel like it was just an event, like a showcase of your literal strength. Like people were swinging, like which is a hard thing to explain because a lot of times when you go to Worlds, it is more strategic, right? Like you're trying to come in first place against 12 other people in your weight class, for instance. Like at Sheffield, everyone may be in a different weight class, and yeah, you're trying to win. But in order to do that, you got to go as close to as or as far over the world record as you can. So you need to hit your list, but like you also need to go big. Like there's no like strategy of playing it a little bit safe for the win in your weight class. So it was like it was cool to just load the bar and lift. And the crowd was unbelievable. Like it was just every time you went out, like every lifter that went out, it was just first lift to the final attempt, just wild. So it was something I always wanted to qualify for, like, and go to. And for me, I mean, it was kind of years in the making. And in my head, I'm like, I hope I didn't build this up too much. You know what I mean? But honest to God, I didn't. Like the second I got off, I was like, I need to come back here.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, we're going to figure it out, but I'm coming back. And it's cool to see too, like even because obviously there's naysayers with everything. Like first Sheffield, well, this won't happen again.
Yeah.
And then it happens again. And each time it sold out a little faster than this year. It sold out in like 36 hours, which is insane because no one even knows who's going.
Exactly.
Like no one even cares. It doesn't matter. But then after the next one, they're moving to a bigger arena, which is really cool as well.
Yeah. So with that meet, obviously you just said that people are kind of taking more swings and kind of basically going for their total to get that win, but in a different light. But it's something that I like to see because personally, I think obviously if you go 9 for 9, that's awesome. And like sometimes like it just happens to be a literal perfect day. Your third attempts are a perfect RPE 10 and everything goes perfectly. But then there's other times where some people go 9 for 9 and everything moves super easy. It's like, what are you doing? You're leaving so much in the tank.
Yes, I am 100% on board with your thought process here. Like I always say, like a 9 for 9 where you win and maybe it's RP 8-9 day. Like that's a privilege. Not many people can do that.
Yeah.
Like usually you're going 9 for 9 because you're either playing a conservative because perhaps you can and that's what you need on that day. That's part of the strategy. Or perhaps like you're saying, like you have that like magical day. where you go RP 10 on everything and you hit it perfectly and you go 9 for 9. And there is nothing fucking better than that. Like, even if you have that day once in your career, it is worth it because it's awesome, you know? And if you're going to try it, you might as well try it on a stage like Sheffield.
Yeah. And kind of from like the multiply side of it, like if you go 9 for 9 in a multiply meet, that's like,
it's like unheard of.
Basically impossible. I've yet to see it done. And if you do, it's probably because maybe you took like token openers raw first and took light attempts,
Right.
because there's so much that can go wrong.
Yes. Yeah. I've never lifted a quip, but like I have known people that have, right? Like I helped at Northeastern one year. I know they're not multiply, but they're equipped. And like, I just remember them saying, they're like, 9 for 9 doesn't exist in equipped, you know? And every once in a while, some will do it, but it's like, what happened here? Like this was unplanned to go 9 for 9.
Yeah. And 90% of the time it's with the shirts.
Yeah. But in a way, it's like, not that you want to go in with a mindset you're going to miss a lift, right?
Yeah.
But the mindset of like, if you miss a lift, doesn't matter. Just move on, you know, like is so important because you can miss lift on a technicality and like you still have to go take another lift and like you just got to move on. Like not everything is going to always go to plan and that's okay. It doesn't really matter, you know?
Yeah. So I guess a question kind of with the standards of, obviously, like the standards that you compete in are relatively higher than, I guess you could say, like the backyard feds that we have. Do you think any sort of politics or bias kind of plays into the calls that some of these judges make sometimes? Or do you think that's kind of just rumors?
Yeah, I don't think so. I think it's kind of just not rumors, but you know, like I mean, there's nothing worse than missing a lift on a technicality on a big stage. Like there isn't. And I'm not saying every call is always right because that's not true. Like
Yeah.
we're humans. Like there's going to be incorrect calls made, but I don't necessarily think that it's like, you know, political per se. At least nothing I have seen in the recent future. Let's put it that way. Or like that they're going after someone specifically. Because I mean, there's plenty of people that you don't get calls made on them, right? Like at the end of the day, if you get 3 whites, like there's no contest. But even if you're getting two whites, like the likelihood of that being a good lift is pretty high.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, there's a reason why it's like 2 whites to pass, because, I mean, you've seen videos of lifts that look good from one angle. I mean, I think the most one we talk about is just always squat depth. It's just like the go-to. Like there's videos you'll see it looks perfect. There's videos you see it look high on one angle, bad on one angle, and they'll get 3. And you're like, that's why I think one of the bigger problems with social media is judging the lift based off of some random video that their friend took so they can post it.
Yes, especially in a meet. And, you know, it's even like, I try to tell people, I coach athletes and sometimes they'll like be like slowing down and pausing like their squat and like, oh, I don't know. And I'm like, if you're this unsure, like think about these judges. They're watching hundreds of lifts in one day. They're seeing it in an instant and they have to take their gut reaction. And especially, you know, like when you're first getting started, like people want to see you succeed.
Exactly.
Like if you are squatting to depth, no one is going to say that's a bad lift. Like you're supposed to be judging on the side of the lifter, like giving them the benefit of the doubt. Right. But I'm always like, don't get that stressed out about it. Like if you look at it and you're like, ooh, I'm high, then you're high.
Yeah.
You know, or like, ooh, maybe I'm borderline, like go a little deeper. But like, don't get like so stressed out that you're squatting ass to grass because that's not going to do you any good either.
Exactly.
Yeah. You know, like it is a part of the game. But
so I obviously we'll shift gears a little bit from that, but you did mention that you do coaching. I know that's something that in powerlifting, you obviously can't make a career of being on the platform because it doesn't pay that much, but there's plenty of things you can do to kind of further that, and coaching is kind of one of the main ones. So maybe tell us about your experience with coaching. Obviously you have a background in exercise science. So at what point did you, I guess maybe go from calling yourself like a trainer to a powerlifting coach?
Sure. I mean, it's probably been about like 5 or 6 years now where I'd say most of my clientele has switched from strength and conditioning athlete or gen pop to powerlifting. And now I would say almost all of the people I coach are powerlifters, except for those that I still have from forever ago that I'm like, are you not sick of me yet? I've been coaching you for 13 years. And it kind of happened naturally, especially since I coached a lot of either athletes or adults that trained in a strength and conditioning style. So even some of those people that I were coaching 10 years ago have kind of transitioned into powerlifting training and competing, which is really cool. So it's like almost like they've been on this journey with me in a way. So it kind of happened naturally. And I did transition to online coaching during COVID, which obviously everyone did during COVID. But then I also just kept it mainly because it fits my lifestyle way better with small children than trying to coach in person as well.
Yeah, and as far as being a coach, obviously every coach has their own style, their own marketing, their own like methodologies they follow, whether it's something they've kind of blended together or have picked up on. Like, I guess example would be like a lot of multiply coaches kind of pick up the conjugate method because of what we've seen from Westside, but have adapted it into their own way. So maybe tell us about kind of some of your maybe pillars as a coach in terms of like mindset and fundamentals, as well as kind of the methodology you use in your programming.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny, since I have been coaching for a while, like not always powerlifting, but in general, I find that most of the clientele that I attract and coach have almost like a similar mindset, right? Like whether they just want to compete once to try it or they're trying to get to, the national level or international level. Um, it's kind of just one of like not many excuses. You know what I mean? Like everyone that I work with is like a very hard worker, and trying to better themselves. And I think that in the end, like that's really important, no matter why you're powerlifting or why you're training in general. Like the process of bettering yourself is never going to be a bad one. For your life in general outside of lifting. I think sometimes you can get sucked in, a little bit to like lifting itself. And getting caught up on whether it's like numbers that we hit or didn't hit or good days and bad days. But in reality, it's like the process that we go through is really what adds so much to our life outside. Because like you said, like no one's making a lot of money off of this. As like an athlete, like you can't make it a career by being a powerlifter.
Exactly.
And competing. It would be nice. But
Yeah, I wish.
So for all of us, there has to be a reason that we show up day in and day out. Because it's like powerlifters are much more than like a casual gym goer. So there has to be like a reason that draws you to that. So I think that the majority of the people I coach, and kind of the biggest thing that I try to promote as a coach, is that the process of bettering yourself within the gym, like, is going to make everything else easier for you. So there's going to be good moments and bad moments, and some things are going to suck and some are going to be great. But you have to go through it and like learn about yourself and go like apply that outside of the gym. And that's kind of what makes the whole thing worth it in the end. Obviously there's varying levels of that for everybody, but I kind of feel like that's what makes people come back, if you will, to the gym.
Yeah.
But yeah, in terms of like programming, kind of like you said, I have been a coach in the strength and conditioning world for a while. Obviously, I've been powerlifting for a while, so I've seen a lot of different methodologies come across. And I think for the most part, most are a blend of a lot of different things. And I kind of think that's how I would consider my own programming. And I think that's how it will always be, because we're always going to be learning more
Yep.
about how the body adapts and specifically how it performs best for powerlifting. If you are looking to compete, like how can you get your most out on meet day? Because that's when you want to.
Yeah, and I think as far as the kind of like coach and athlete relationship, I think if your coach shares a similar why, it's obviously going to be a much better connection, and you're going to be able to relate to that athlete, or you're going to be able to relate to your coach and be able to have maybe some difficult conversations that you wouldn't have with someone who just says, here's your program for the week, see you next week, pay me, rather than you actually build a relationship, and you kind of can understand maybe why they're having some troubles with this certain part of the program or this block or their life event that's keeping them from training heavy.
Yeah. And like, kind of like you said, like, I think that's important distinction that like isn't always a distinction, if you know what I mean. Like if you are having someone coach you, like there should be that communication, there should be that trust that's being built, there should be like a active coaching relationship rather than like here's your program, right? Which is very valuable, and like that is absolutely something that like you can ask for and want. But if you are looking for a coach, like you should be getting that, because it can add so much to your experience, and help you along the process as well.
Yeah. I always like to say there's two types of athletes. There's an athlete that needs to have someone be their brakes and someone needs to be their gas.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's different coaches that are better at doing one or the other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree.
Because
I'm just thinking because I need, as an athlete, I need breaks so
me
bad.
too. Yeah, I will go RPE 10. I will max out every day. I will basically
Yeah.
run myself into the ground if I don't have someone being like, hey, calm down a little bit. Maybe leave a jump in the tank this week. Like, we're going to go heavier
Mm-hmm.
next week. Like, relax.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. I think that everyone needs to go through that every once in a while. You know what I mean? Once they get used to the heavy weights, like, yeah, go ahead. Let me add some breaks to you. Like, test it out. Test the water. See what it feels like.
Yeah. And personally, from coaching some people, it's something I tried to do, but kind of not only is it super saturated, but I kind of got bogged up in this and worrying about my own training as a young athlete, relatively young. But something I did learn is that it's much more fun to give someone the breaks rather than trying to motivate someone to be like, hey, like ramp it up, like let's go. It's a lot easier to be
Mm-hmm.
like, hey, calm down, like you're doing great. The only problem that comes with being the breaks is sometimes they don't listen and then they hurt themselves.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. And of course, sometimes it means you're the bearer of bad news. Like, hey, chill out.
Yeah.
You know, like, yes, you are strong, but like, let's work our way here. Let's not always run it hot.
And then, like you said, you were kind of a big component of no excuses. I think that's definitely important in an athlete. And obviously, you're a prime example of no excuses, going from competing at a high level to having twins and then going back to a high level.
Yeah. I mean, it's not to be like, oh, I'm so tough, no excuses. But at the end of the day, like, if you're like, it's an option,
Yeah.
right? Like, you don't have to do this. And I think sometimes at the end of the day, like, I don't know if people feel like they have to or they forget that it's an option, but it's like, take the step back, take the bird's eye view, like, realize that this is something you're choosing to do and there has to be a reason. So, like, if you're giving excuses, then take the step back and realize, like, did I forget why I'm doing this? You know what I mean? Or do I not want to do this anymore? Because both of those are fine options, you know? Like, and at some point, for most people, there probably will be a point where they're like, I don't know if this is for me anymore. Cool. Take the step back. Don't torture yourself with it, you know? Because you can always come back.
Yeah.
Like, it will always be there. So yeah, if like you're in it and you're choosing, you're opting to be in it, like, you should do yourself a service and not have excuses about it. You should show up for your training. You should, if you have, you know, to do your rehab, or be aware of your nutrition, try to get some sleep. You know what I mean? Like, all those little things, like, it does matter at the end of the day, because it makes you feel so much better.
Yeah. If you're controlling all the outside variables as best as you can, I think obviously with multiply, there's a bunch more variables and it's controlling those. But I think in general, if you can approach powerlifting as control as many variables as you can, you will be way more successful than just, all right, let's go train. Oh, I don't feel like training today, I'm going to skip today. Or I didn't get to squat this weekend because I decided to go party with my friends. Like, if you control all the variables, it makes it a lot more simpler and a lot more easier to be successful.
100%. And like, listen, if you want to pick and choose your days, that's fine. But then don't expect to have like the perfect result either. Like, have realistic expectations, no matter which way you're thinking about it, you know? But I have a question. Multiply.
Yes.
How long does it take to get through a multiply session?
Honestly, it totally depends. The lower days are long. My coach, Mike Skiba, he gives us a shitload of volume, which is something I'm very for. I think volume is something that's very underdone by everyone,
Yeah.
especially now that I'm doing like a true high volume workout. And I'm like, oh shit, this is what I've been missing, because I've been making so much gains in all my accessories as well as on my lifts. But yeah, when you have to kind of, not only do you have to warm up longer because you have to go to much higher weights, you have to worry about putting your briefs on and then your suit on
Right.
and then setting your straps
Right.
and then, okay,
Right.
what went wrong with this set? Let's retry these straps. Do we go back down in weight? Do we take this again? So that's kind of where I was saying before with so many variables is it just takes more time. And with experience, you can kind of get through them faster. But like for me, let's say like a volume lower day, which I did yesterday, I squat before and then I pull and then I had 6 accessories. I think it was about a 3.5 hour workout.
Yeah. All right. All right. That's fair. That's fair. I thought you would say longer. I'm not gonna lie.
Well,
That's long, but
it's because I try to get it done and I usually turn some of my accessories into supersets. But like
yeah.
when we go squat on Sundays, like we'll get there under the bar by 9:30. Sometimes we're still squatting at noon, 12:30, just because
Okay.
it becomes more of a hangout. Obviously, we get our work
Yeah.
done, and once it's accessory time, you kind of just lock in and go do your accessories. But
Yeah.
that's one of the things I love about the multiply community is a lifting session with your crew is more than just putting weights on the bar and squatting. It's all the camaraderie that comes with it.
Yeah. That was for sure the thing I noticed like when I was at Northeastern. I was like, oh, like equip lifting is a team sport.
Yeah.
Like there's literally one person on the platform, but you need other people with you. You know?
So I know you train at Titan and you train at home
Yeah.
sometimes. What's I know Titan is primarily like a strongman gym, but obviously you have Dave and Bob, and I'm not sure who else trains there. But do you guys kind of train together, or how does that like? What's the environment and the culture around that gym?
Yeah. So definitely, I mean, Eric is the owner. He's a strongman, super good dude. He started as a strongman gym, and I feel like it's powerlifter takeover. No, I'm just kidding. But like honestly, it's probably almost 50-50 at this point between strongmen and powerlifters. Um, I personally usually train in the morning during the week, so I don't see many people. There every couple people sprinkling, but most people train at night. But on the weekend, it's always kind of like you're saying, like a hangout, which is great. So it's a lot of fun on the weekends, mostly Saturdays and smaller group on Sundays. But whole bunch of people just lifting weights. There are powerlifters and strongmen there, but it just makes, I mean, it makes training so much better, especially on your big days. Like most people have big days on the weekend because that's when they have time to have big days. So it just makes the whole experience so much better.
Yeah, and that's something that I try to promote to kids that walk into my gym, not my gym, but the gym I train at.
Yeah, yeah.
Kids that like maybe want to come in and just throw their headphones on and get a workout. Like if you're like a regular gym goer and you go to your local Planet Fitness or your Lifetime,
Sure.
like cool, do
Yeah.
that, go on your own. But I think with powerlifting,
Right.
like you're gonna get so much more out of it by being with people, whether it's maybe learning a new trick or a new cue or being like, okay, maybe cut it there. That was a little heavy and moves a lot slower than your last set, or vice versa. Like, hey, that flew. Maybe they were gonna cut it there, but like they have another 100-pound jump in them. Like it just adds
Right.
so many more aspects to get you to the higher ceiling.
100%. And kind of like you were saying, like if you're someone that needs breaks or if you're someone that needs gas, having good training partners can do that like naturally.
Yeah, it's even like that's the thing. It doesn't matter whether you're raw or equipped. There's so much to learn by being in a group, and I think that the crew mentality approach to powerlifting is where you see a lot more success.
Yeah, definitely. I
So,
agree.
kind of last segment before we kind of wrap things up, we'll kind of talk about being able to separate powerlifting training from life and kind of managing stress. Obviously, with being a mother and kind of dealing with that, there's its own set of skills that come with being able to train at a high level and being a mom. But maybe just in general, in some other areas of life, what are some of the things that have helped you be able to manage both?
Honestly, I think figuring out like this is one of the blessings and curse, right? Like I'm older. I'm an older powerlifter, especially at the, on the world stage. Like I was the only female born in the 80s at Sheffield. And I was like, ooh, that slaps you in the face a little different, and there's good and bad things about that, right? Like bad thing, I'm older. Like it takes me longer to recover from things, right? Like if I'm getting injured, it's not going to take me a week to recover anymore. It's going to take me a little longer. Perhaps I can't handle as much volume as some of the younger females, but it is what it is. But I also have a lot of experience, and that helps as well. The pro side of is I have a a lot of experience dealing with different adversity in life, or just life in general, right? Like as you get older, more life happens. And I think, unfortunately, when a lot of life happens to people, it's kind of the time they step away from training in general, whether it's powerlifting or not. And for many people, it would help so much to just adjust your training and lean into it, because it can help you get through difficult periods of time. Both having the routine and the act of basically taking care of yourself through training, but also if you train in a gym, like having the community as well, taking your mind off of other things. So, like, yes, you have to know your priorities and you have to know what's important so that you can have a routine and get everything you need done. But understanding, like, that it doesn't have to be perfect and that you can adjust it throughout your life to fit your life can be incredibly powerful.
Yeah, I think powerlifting is great for the perfectionist. As someone who tries to make everything perfect, you learn very quickly that nothing's perfect. And if you can just be 95% perfect, then you're going to be a lot
Hmm.
better. I think having the proactive mindset versus the reactive mindset is also something that's huge. So maybe if a younger lifter approached you and was trying to kind of learn how to have that mindset, what would you say to them?
Uh, I mean, I would just say learning how to be flexible within some rigidity, right? Like I used to be super rigid with my training, with my life, with everything. And if anything went outside of what what I had planned, it would really, like, I would have a tough time with it. And I feel like for younger lifters in general, that is something that can hold so true, because you're learning how to manage your stress in general, like your life stress, whether it's in school or you're just starting working. And as I've gotten older, I feel like the resiliency has grown through becoming more flexible within the 24 hours. So I know what I need to get done within 24 hours, but like how that's going to happen is going to be a lot different depending on the day.
Yeah.
And being okay with being flexible with that is huge. And obviously you can expand that, knowing what you need to get done within the week, right? Being a bit flexible with what things can shift day to day and what things can't is huge, not just for, you know, seeing success, but also like finding progress and finding happiness within what you're doing too.
Yeah, and I guess on a micro scale, the kind of idea of auto regulation kind of comes into mind. Like for some days, like what was it, 2 weeks ago? I think I decided to deadlift a day early because I was like, I feel really good. I'm gonna deadlift today, and that way, when
Mm,
I get into the shirt on Friday, I'll be even more recovered, and then I'll have a better bench session. But that's only when the schedule aligns. Like if you have a pretty normal routine where you can be flexible in that way, then do it. But if it's,
sure.
oh, I have this meeting this day and you have to move training, like you have to be able to do that as well.
100%. Yeah. And I think some people, like whether it's like you have 3 days that you can train or you have five, it doesn't matter. But be realistic with yourself. And then, like, when you have that time, put it all in and like you'll be okay. The consistency at the end of the day is what's going to save you. It's way better than being like, I totally can train 5 days a week and then like 1 week training once and then the next training five and the next training three, and just, like kind of being everywhere. Where it's like just commit to three, hit three, and go from there. Like with anything else. But yeah, being able to realize that like it doesn't have to be perfect to be well done. You know what I mean? Like you don't have to be perfect to see progress.
Yeah, and from a
And
pro, you can go on.
I was just gonna say, like, it's really not about perfection anyways,
Yeah,
you know?
and from a programming perspective, I've seen this example before of like, say they have a 4 day schedule or whatever, and it's an off season, not in prep, and they miss a day, and they're like, oh, I'm gonna do that this day. It's like, no, you're gonna do that day because that's what your schedule was. If you missed a day, you didn't actually
Right,
miss a day. You don't have to make up for it. You just, okay,
right,
I missed it, move on to the next day. It's fine.
right,
Instead of like compounding each day, then all of a sudden you're 2 weeks behind when you just skipped
right.
over it. You're gonna be fine.
Or you're dying of fatigue because you just did 8 days in a
Or that,
row.
yeah, exactly. You're like, oh, I'm gonna make up 3 weeks in 2 days. Like, no.
Yeah. It's okay. You're gonna be okay. Yeah.
So, kind of moving on from that for you for the rest of the year, what are some of the goals that you have maybe as an athlete as well as a coach?
I mean, as an athlete, I'm going to nationals in couple weeks, like 5 weeks or whatever. Just pretty much hopefully secure my spot to go to World this year, and then hopefully from there I'll be able to go back to Sheffield. That's the goal. And I'm also going to World Games, which is like something new for powerlifting this year, or for raw powerlifting at least. So World Games will be in August. That's pretty cool because I don't know, something new. Why not, right? So that's hopefully the plan as an athlete. As a coach, I got like pretty big crew going to nationals this year, which is exciting. And then I also have a lifter that I'm coaching competing at Worlds who will actually be like in my flight, which is really cool.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. So that will be a really cool experience and like full circle experience. She's also a mom, super badass. She's from the UK, but so that's exciting.
So with that, obviously handling is a very important part of the meet for an athlete.
Yeah.
How are you going to manage doing that if you're in the same flight?
Well, I mean, obviously she's not local to me at all. I don't usually handle her anyways. But she has handlers that like she trusts from her country.
Yeah.
So like a typical meet, like we'll go over attempts and whatnot, and then kind of I'll hand it over to her and her team, and they'll take it from there.
Yeah. So I think we could kind of wrap things up here. So I'll ask you my final question. If you could give a new powerlifter or someone going into their first meet a word of advice, what would you say?
If you're doing your first meet, like have fun. Yes, have some goals, but have fun. Don't put so much pressure on yourself. Learn, because the meet, it's a sport. There's lifting in the gym, and then there's the meet. So like, go learn, go meet people, and go have fun.
Yeah, I think the learning is the biggest thing you can get out of your first meet.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I want to thank you again for taking the time to come on. It was my pleasure.
Thank you. Appreciate it.